Hi, I'm Greg Dell here with attorney Rachel Alters. And Rachel, I want to talk about you've been representing, or you have represented, um, many claimants that have been diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
And obviously, the diagnosis of cancer in itself is disabling, and then people go through the different types of treatment. And what we find is that a lot of claimants have side effects from either the chemo or the radiation
Right.
or the medication, um, even after they're fortunate enough to be found cancer-free
Correct.
from at least from the diagnostic testing, yet they're unable to return to work. And so I want to talk about your experience with those claims and whether a person can still be considered disabled when they come back with a diagnosis of being cancer-free. And then secondary, I want to talk to you a little bit about how many people, obviously secondary to the cancer diagnosis, are experiencing depression, anxiety, and things like that over what's going on in their life, and why disability carriers will try to manipulate the diagnosis of depression and anxiety in an effort to limit their claims. So,
Right.
first of all, how have you been able to help claimants who go through the diagnosis of cancer and then are free of their cancer but still say they're disabled? How do you continue to get those people paid?
Well, many times the insurance carriers are usually pretty sympathetic to a client that has cancer, and when they're going through the actual cancer treatment, with the chemo and the radiation, they're extremely ill. And many times they will get approved for their disability benefits, but as soon as the chemotherapy and radiation are done and they get a clean bill of health, meaning the cancer is pretty much gone,
Or in remission, yeah.
or they're in remission, the insurance carrier tends to cut them off. And what they tend to say is that, well, their oncologist now says that they're free of cancer, they're no longer disabled, they can go back to work. But unfortunately, most of the time, with at least my clients that I've helped and that I represent, this is not possible, because once you get chemotherapy and radiation, it's a poison that's put into your body that affects the rest of your body, and a lot of the side effects are permanent. My clients suffer from neuropathy in their hands and their feet, where they can't feel their hands, so it's very hard to type. They can't walk. A couple of my clients have to use assistive devices like canes and walkers because they have such severe neuropathy in their feet and their legs that they can't stand on their own, it's very sad. I mean, they don't have cancer any longer, but now they have another disabling condition that prevents them from working.
One of the other complaints as a residual side effect of the treatments is fatigue, brain fog,
Yeah.
those kinds of things that affect someone's ability to do their job. Now, this isn't about someone saying, oh, I'm bedridden. It's about, hey, I can't go back to work and commit to an employer 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and take on projects and have to be there at certain times and meeting deadlines and everything else, because one day I may feel okay, but the next day I feel tired, or I don't feel I have my concentration. And then what the disability company does is they go back to like an oncologist or something and say, does this person have any cancer? And they'll be like, no. The other thing is what medications are continued to be taken after the diagnosis, and how does that make a person feel? So that's the common situation that goes on with the cancer diagnosis disability claims, because in the beginning and when you go through a surgery or treatments, disability carriers usually don't put up much of a fight.
Right.
It's what happens after. Now, for some people, it's 2-3 months of treatment, and they feel like, the disability company says you should go back, but this process can go on for years or months, and now you're out of work, and the disability company is like, oh, you should just be able to go back, and now you're a 55, 56-year-old person, and you're like, wait, I've been out of work for 2 years. I can't just jump back, and I don't feel like I can do it.
Right.
So that's another, very tough thing that we deal with all the time. So
Yeah.
important for claimants to keep up with their doctors, and once you move away from the oncologist, who you end up only seeing maybe once every 4 to 6 months, it's your general doctor or your rheumatologist or your neurologist or whoever it is, and your internal medicine doctor who's going to support your claim. And that documentation is really, really important.
Absolutely.
So where do you see this line? Almost every client we have ends up with some form of anxiety or depression surrounding their diagnosis. Where are the disability carriers taking advantage in that realm?
Yeah, that becomes an issue in most of my cases, where the cancer is, they've been cured from the cancer or they're in remission, and they're suffering from a lot of pain. They have chemo brain, they're fatigued, and as a result, they suffer secondary depression and anxiety, which is normal for anybody who has been diagnosed with cancer, and their whole life changes. They used to be vibrant, they used to have a career, and now they're not able to work, and this makes them depressed. The insurance carriers tend to run with this, and they will look at their policy and say, well, there's a 24-month mental nervous limitation on the policy, and it's our opinion and our peer review physician's opinion that their depression and anxiety is causing or contributing to their disability, so we're going to cut them off after 24 months. And this is happening over and over again, and we fight these things. We fight them very seriously, and we fight them hard with our experts and the treating doctors, because this is not the primary reason why they're not able to work. This is a secondary cause. And we're usually pretty successful, but it's very important that the claimant's treating physician documents all the physical issues, and that these issues are the reasons why the claimant is depressed and has anxiety, and it's not the other way around. So when we fight these and when we do an appeal and we end up in court, the judge can see that this is a secondary cause and it's not the primary cause of their disability.
Right, and the challenge is that most psychologists, not to put them down, but they just don't keep great records, in terms of thinking that they're going to be scrutinized by an insurance company, whereas they just put a couple notes. They're often illegible, and they say, hey, we'll do a report for you, but the insurance companies take advantage of that because they ask the doctors for the notes. First of all, psych notes are like the highest threshold of HIPAA records that are released, and then these doctors aren't used to having their records scrutinized. They have close relationships with their patients. They keep a couple notes and they know what's going on, and then they get their records subpoenaed or requested, and they're not necessarily done according to the appropriate standards, the psychological standards for doing the medical records, and then the insurance company says, well, you don't have medical support. And so then you're stuck in this unfortunate situation where you have to appeal, and then hope that you can get them the appropriate, recreate the information to support your claim. So these are a couple issues. The most common ones we see surrounding the cancer diagnosis, unfortunately, it's something that we deal with on a daily basis for people with those diagnoses, and we see some great recoveries, but there's a difference between recovering and living your life versus going back to work, and that's what we're able to portray very well on behalf of our clients. So if you need any help with your short-term or long-term disability claim, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're applying for a claim, you're on claim and want help, or you've been denied and you need to file an appeal or a lawsuit, feel free to call Rachel or any of our disability attorneys. We always offer a free immediate phone consultation, and we're available to help you anywhere in the country.